So these are both just generic instructors. Let's go ahead and create a subclass for part-time instructor. So a part-time instructor is going to look exactly the same as an instructor, but there's going to be a different method for calculating whether the course load is appropriate or not. Um, for now, the only thing that's going to be different is I will have for default for schedule OK. It's going to take a number of courses, and then for a generic instructor, I have no way of specifying the code for doing this. You need to know whether somebody's part-time or full-time to say whether the schedule is okay or not. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to throw an error. This is aimed at other programmers, is abstract. So I can be a little cryptic in that message. And actually in Python it's raised. So if I call schedule OK directly on an instructor object, it's going to say, it's going to throw an error that schedule op, could be schedule OK, is abstract. And abstract means that for a generic type of object like instructor, I don't have enough information to actually execute this code. And so it's an error to even call it. So now if I go back here to my course instructors and I try to print mark.scheduleOK for 3 courses, this should actually raise an error because Mark is just an instructor. And it does. So the output comes in a slightly funky order, but it actually printed this first, but this is on a different stream and yada yada. So bottom line is that I ended up raising an exception that schedule OK is abstract. So that tells me as a programmer that I can't call it directly. So what I need to do instead is, instead of calling, I'm going to comment this one out and we'll do part-time first. So I'm going to make Greg be a part-time instructor, and then a part-time instructor is going to inherit from instructor. And then I showed that part-time instructor inherits from instructor like so. I put parentheses there, but it's not a parameter list because this isn't a function. It's showing an inheritance relationship that part-time instructor inherits from instructor. And what that means is that everything I know how to do with instructor, I now know how to do with part-time instructor as well. Now, if I don't do anything at all, then part-time instructor is going to look just like instructor. But what I want to do differently here is, instead of having an abstract schedule OK method, I'm going to give it a concrete piece of code that will actually return a result. So let's def schedule OK. And then for a part-time instructor, the load has to be less than 3 unless it's an exception term. So if courses less than 3, then we're going to return true. And then we're also going to have an additional exception term, which is going to be Boolean. And then I want all instructors to take this thing here. So if it's less than 3, that's fine. Elif exception term and courses equals 3, that's also fine. Otherwise, it's bad. So let's go ahead and try this. I'm asking if Greg, actually let's do Greg here. And let me comment this out because I don't have a mark object right now. So I need to inherit my part-time, or I need to import my part-time instructor. And then I'm making one of them and I'm calling schedule OK. And then let's call it, let's say 3 hours, no exception. And then schedule OK, that's going to be false. And then we'll do 2 hours, no exception. So this is going to be 2, false. And then we'll do one more test here. And then this is going to be 3 hours with an exception term. Okay, so because I've given a concrete implementation for part-time instructor, this schedule OK method should work fine. So let's run it and see what we get. Oh, and I didn't return my value here. Yeah, I'm not quite sure why I did that. That was weird. So I have to actually return the value. Okay. Good. So for a part-time instructor, 3 hours with no exception is not okay. 2 hours with no exception is okay, and 3 hours with an exception is okay. So let's do full-time instructor, and then full-time instructor is going to look exactly the same for now, except it's going to have a different schedule OK method. So this is going to be a full-time instructor. And then for full-time instructors, if a course is less than 3, if courses is less than 3, that's false. Because all instructors, unless they have release time, have to teach at least 3 courses. So I'm actually going to add here release time. And also, I'm going to add it to this method and also add it to this method. And then that's not a method. Add it here. Okay. So for part-time instructors, release time will always be false because part-time instructors don't have release time. But for full-time instructors, if course is less than 3 and not release time, then this is false. Else if course is less than 3 and release time, that's true. Else if courses is exactly 3, that's true. Else we're more than 3, so else if exception term, then true. Else it's false. So this case here is we're more than 3 because we did less than 3 and then exactly equal to 3. And then this is either true or false. So can't be less than 3 or we would have gotten this clause or this clause. Can't be exactly 3 because then we would have hit this clause. So that means it must be more than 3. And if it's more than 3 in an exception term, then that's okay. Otherwise, it's not okay because it's more than 3 and not an exception term. Okay. So let's go ahead and try it. So what I'm going to do is in my thing here, I'm going to go ahead and create Mark as a full-time instructor. And then I'm going to print Mark. And then let's do actually Greg, comma that. Greg. And then we're going to copy all these things. And then this is false for release time. And I could use keyword params for that to make it a little shorter, but I'm okay for right now. Okay, so 3 hours, no exception. This is going to be Mark and Mark.schedule okay. And we'll add a couple more cases here as well. Okay, and then let's do 4 hours here. So let me copy that. So this is going to be 4 hours, no exception. So 4 hours, no exception. And then this is going to be 4 hours with exception. Yeah, so 4 hours with an exception. And then 2 hours, no exception. And we'll also add 2 hours with release time. 2 hours, no exception, 2 hours with release time. Okay, so that's pretty much all of the different cases. Let's go ahead and run it, see what we end up with. So full-time instructor, I need to import that. And I ended up with an extra space, so let me fix that. Okay, good. So let's see what we ended up with. So for part-time, no exception, 3 hours is not okay. 2 hours with no exception is okay. 3 hours with an exception is okay. Then for full-timers, 3 hours with no exception is okay. 2 hours, no exception is false because it's no release time. So this is underload. And then 2 hours with release time is okay. 3 hours with an exception is okay. 4 hours with no exception is not okay. And 4 hours with an exception is okay. So this all looks like it's working. And it illustrates how to create classes and subclasses. So next video, we'll start looking at a course and a list of instructors.